Happy morning muli, Miss Horizon Chaser. At narito ang Session 3, Role of Multilateral Development Banks and International Financial Institutions and the Transitions to More Resilient and Greener Financial Systems. So, paano ko ito magkaugnay ang MDBs at ang IFIs? So, alamin natin yung committed to aligning their operation with the 2015 Paris Agreements, which will affect all facets for their activities. Ang Multilateral Development Banks or MDBs and itong IFIs or International Financial Institutions can also play a catalyzing role in the transition to more resilient and greener financial systems. This session will showcase the challenges ng MDBs and IFIs. So, paano nila harapin o maipakita yung development na magkaroon sila na magkaisa ng mga goals na itong mga agreement na ito at ma-enhance yung mga rule and financial system na papaano ma-manage at magkaroon ng mobilized capital na mababa or low carbon and climate resilient investment. So, alamin natin. At narito ang moderator na si Miss ROBERTA CASALI, Vice President Finance and Risk Management Asian Development Bank, and at iba pang mga panauhin. Alright, so tuloy-tuloy lamang sa ating pakikinig kung ano man ang ating matutunan hinggil dito sa itong samahan ng MDBs and IFIs.
Why you're here, if you are not lending, then I have to say that for those people who may know or may have little knowledge about BIS, is we are basically a group of major central banks around the world, represent at least 95% of world GDP. So not only that, we support, and also indeed in the matter of the fact, we host a few number of the financial standard setting bodies, including the FSB and BCBS and the CPMI and those names. That's why I think we should also play some role in this very important topic, which is how to address the climate change, particularly the climate change, the finance related issues. But I would like to address these issues through the eyes, particularly of the central banks. But I do know, the topic is quite large. Possibly difficult to address each and every aspect of this topic in such a short period of time. But I want start with or focus on one of the important aspect of these issues, which is the climate change itself, pretty much related to the negative spillover impact from the climate change itself to the society, and also of course to the economy itself. And so given the complexities and the issues, and which is multidimensional, I personally don't think there is a solutions to kill all the issues, meaning there's no panacea. So I don't think there is a sort of the solutions to all the problems. However, when people try to address issues, then people normally go to the framework. So in my eyes, and I see a framework which consists of three pillars, which I consider themselves are quite relevant, which I call the three pillar, basically the MPC, which is, okay, don't confuse MPC. I'm not saying this is a monetary policy committee. But by MPC, I means first, this has to be market-based. Second, the framework has to be policy-oriented. And third, the framework has to emphasize what is the role of the central banks can play in terms of enabling the net zero transitions. First, of course, as you know, central bank has a mandate to keep the price stabilities and financial stabilities, and to us, keep the two stabilities, particularly the price stabilities, is our ultimate objectives. And these days, as we've seen it, inflation is at historically high levels compared with the last few decades, and we know the reasons. And here, I want to emphasize, in the foreseeable futures, we have seen there's a rising attention on the so-called long-term supply factors related to inflation. Let me briefly name a few. The first one is the geopolitical tensions that lead the world to be less receptive to globalization, and particularly right after the COVID. And we have seen that there's great disruptions in terms of the supply chains. And second, of course, there we see the reversal of the early positive trend in terms of the demographic trend, meaning in many parts of the world, particularly the advanced economies, and partially in emerging markets like China, the population aging problems. So, and of course, the transition to the greener economy itself also entails the cost premiums, particularly in the short terms. So the crucial point is how to manage these long-term supply-side shocks in order to have orderly transitions to the green economies. And certainly there's no readily answer to that. And whether or not this carries the implication to the monetary policy framework, or it requires different monetary policy approach or monetary policy tools, that's pretty much at the core or center of today's debate among central bankers and to a larger extent among the policymakers. So that's one point. Second, pillar two, policy matters. Obviously, policy matters, including carbon taxes, including how to determine the levels of the subsidies, how to arrange the subsidies, how to eliminate or the exit of subsidy policies. But here, what I want to say about central banks, in terms of what they can contribute in themselves, other than providing enabling environments like setting up the right monetary policy framework. One, central bank can focus on assessing sustainability related risk. I think that Bruno and other colleagues has done that tremendously yesterday. I am very much agreed with the discussion they pointed out yesterday. And second, of course, the central bank can contribute directly to the economy-wide transitions towards net zero by steering investment towards low-carbon economic activities using various policy tools. And of course, central bank can also enhance the development of market in sustainable finance. And of course, the number three, central bank can encourage the adoptions of new technology, particularly the digital the technologies. I want to highlight that in the Innovation Hub, Hong Kong centers, they launched a project called Genesis, which serves right to that kind of purposes. So if people are interested in it, so I would encourage people to look for the details. Okay, now to come to the Pillar 3 cooperations. Needless to say, these issues go beyond the national borders, and the international cooperations has to be there. Carbon pricing works most effectively if there is a consistent cross-border approach. And of course, the international corporations can play a role as investors in issuing and investing in green bond market. Particularly, those international standard setters, they can play the role that to make sure there is a consistent and comparable and transparent the ways so that people can work on this stable environment. So, in all, I think before we're talking about how much money we can put it in, we need a stable, predictable macro environment. We need to ensure financial stability, particularly make sure the financial institutions in the health conditions, and we will have to make sure all of us will be on the same page to work on the same issues. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tao, and thank you for having raised the importance of the framework, the importance of the role of central banks and monetary policy tools. You mentioned to greening the financial system, but only you mentioned the very important role that they have to foster innovation in this field. And now let me go over to more specific questions from the MDBs or to the MDBs colleagues. I would like to ask Dana, what do MDBs currently do to advance the greening of domestic financial systems in recipient countries, and what are the main challenges that they are facing? Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. It's my first time here, so I already must say that I'm falling in love with Manila and Philippines. So I'm from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. I don't think that many of you know our regional bank because we don't necessarily cover this part of the world. So let me introduce EBRD very briefly. We are the Baltics to Egypt, as we describe it. Our capital base is 30 billion on annual basis. We finance about 12 to 13 billion across the region. Out of this, about 40% are actually going through our partners as well. That without engagement of private sector, it will be really difficult to reach the net zero and to really move the dial on Paris alignment. In line with other MDBs, EBRD has been making a lot of climate-related commitments, and to name a few, of course, as part of the greening of financial system, we have a commitment to deliver a certain volume of green financing. We have a commitment to do 50% on annual basis by 2025. We already hit this target last year. We also, prepare our TCFD reports. So this is part of our engagement on climate as well, to show that we walk the talk. But the most exciting part of our work that I wanted to mention today is our Paris alignment work. Because all MDBs by now have made Paris alignment commitments. The commitments are the same, however, timelines are different. Given our shareholder mix, we were actually asked to move forward our deadline for aligning our financing with objectives of Paris Agreement. So from January this year, we actually have to have all financing screened and aligned with the objectives of Paris Agreement. Now, when this commitment was made, that was about a couple of years ago, we in financial sector could see that this is going to be a bit of a challenge, because back then there was no cookbook for Paris alignment. There were not many tools in place. We could definitely see that the financial sector was moving in a certain direction, because it was just when the network for greening financial systems has emerged, the TCFD guidance was becoming more and more refined. So we could see that that was the direction of travel for financial sector. However, we did not have the full picture of what is happening in our region. So as a first step, we actually did a survey of our partner financial institutions, if you can move to the next slide, to look at how our 300 more or less institutions actually look at climate. And we put particular focus on climate risks, how the institutions look at impact of climate on their portfolio, but also impact of their portfolio on climate in terms of carbon emissions. We asked about, for example, what are internal arrangements, is, for example, risk involved in discussions on climate risk. When we got the results back, I actually heard some of our board members saying this is really alarming, and that they had a few sleepless nights, because it was clear that financial sector was not ready to look at climate from the perspective of climate risk, but also it was not seeing climate. It was very much constrained to individual green products. I'm sure that it resonates with our ADB. We have to look at Paris alignment and financial sector. We better look at it as the biggest opportunity of a decade to be transformative. And we built the Paris alignment for financial sector around the topic of transition planning, which means we will gradually expect our partner financial institutions to actually have an institutional plan. Stop there, how to, but I will be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana, because I think you gave me...
Absolutely, I would call it a bottom-up approach. We hear a lot of top-down, but working with the financial institutions and helping them build their internal capacity will be absolutely crucial.
So, and this is a great example of concrete work on the topic, and thank you for sharing this experience with us. So now, over to Tatiana. What is the toolbox that MDBs can deploy to these ends, and the value of each instrument? If you can give us an idea of this. So investment, advocacy, policy dialogue, all those. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. And so I'll start with the toolbox, and you have on the screen. This is based on a set of policy tools for greening the financial sector. That's one of the approaches. And this kind of shows the range of policies that take to green of the financial sector, thinking both of risks and opportunities, right? Takes both sides. And the policies go all the way from strategy and coordination, working with the various ministries, the central bank, the regulatory authorities. What is the main roadmap for the country in terms of where are we going? Before you even think about the financial sector, what is the vision for the country? Of course, there is capacity building, skill sets. This is new for everyone. So there is a lot of awareness raising, capacity building for the various stakeholders, not just the financial sector, not just policy makers. They're the ones who are going to undergo this economic transformation, right? There's the risk side, and I think you had a session yesterday, and apologies for missing that, discussing all the regulation, putting the vision. Of course, the role of transparency, improving information, climate information. Again, this is all new. There is a lot of work to be done in there. Taxonomy, setting standards. What are we talking about? What exactly are the risks that we're measuring? Disclosures. How do we get financial institutions, the private sector, to follow, to track those risks? Of course, tracking risks would help better decision-making by everyone, policymakers, firms, financial sector. And so MDBs have been extremely active on that front in helping set standards, improve transparency, give guidance to the different players and the different stakeholders on what exactly matters, how do we go about it. So it's not even just identifying, it's also implementation, right? It's setting standards, but also how do you implement? How do you go about implementing those standards? Developing markets. How do we foster financing for sustainability? Are there specific instruments that may be more catered, more suitable for these new types of investments that we're looking for? Investments to mitigate emissions, investments for adaptation, to deal with climate risks. And here it's fostering corporate, sovereign, green bonds, sovereign-linked, sustainability-linked bonds, loans, but also background, like think of the enabling environment for that, or other types of support, indirect supports like guarantees, greening all that could support the development of some of those new instruments. And of course, greening financial institutions, the developmental institutions like the development banks, the country level ones. There's a huge endeavor there. You can green that financial institution and you can green the operation, but you can also green the way it tackles, it reaches out to financial institutions, to firms. So there's a whole agenda on that front. And I think the way MDBs, or at least that's how we do it at the World Bank, a lot of that support comes from capacity building through technical assistance, direct investments. But I believe there's also, I think, 2 additional goals for MDBs and IFIs. In addition to this country level work, you go and you work directly with countries, but I think there's 2 additional ones that MDBs and IFIs are in a very unique position. One of them, it's a convening role. These 2 blocks, for instance, this is very specific for the financial system. But when you think of risks and opportunities, let's zoom in on the opportunities, because the risk we already had a discussion, the opportunities. When you're thinking about scaling up sustainable finance, what are you talking about? You're talking about complex challenges, both from the financial institutions, because there are market failures there are financial market failures, but there are also challenges coming from the private sector. And talk to the bankers, what they're going to say. Many will raise the issue there's a lack of investment opportunities. There's a lack of bankable projects. This is a reflection of an issue in the private sector. So when you're thinking about financial sector policies, it's just one side of the puzzle. You need to think of private sector challenges, developing the enabling environment for business to make these investments in the first place. So you need to talk, when you think about developing, greening the economy, you need to think of not just the financial sector policymakers, you need to have at the table the real sector, the ones that are dealing with companies. Bigger, I think the way and the convening role, it's bringing to the table, putting at the table all these different stakeholders in the country, make sure they talk to each other, make sure that the range of policies is coordinated and it's developed in a very coherent way. So what I am doing as a financial sector policymaker is not being undone by another set of policies. Think of, I'm trying to green the economy and there are few subsidies from the other side. So if I don't put MOF in the table, then I'm missing that linkage. So I think this role of convening, of putting everyone sitting down and talking, I think MDBs and IFIs are in a very unique position to put them all on the table. And lastly, my last sentence is advocacy. I think MDBs play a very crucial role, especially the regional IFIs and the ones working with developing countries, which is bringing the emerging market perspective to global policy making. Because, as I mentioned, there's a whole set of new financial infrastructure being built, taxonomies, disclosures, all that, in many instances, they are being developed by high-income countries for high-income countries. So you need that voice of emerging markets. How are those policies affecting the role? It's also there. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Very clear toolkit of many different instruments to reach real and concrete results for our clients, but let me say for everybody, because it's the good. It's an action for good, not only good intention, but real actions. And holistic vision to do all this that we definitely get from your intervention. Thank you again. SYED, please, okay, yes. Will further assist in strengthening local capital markets in Asian developing countries to facilitate, inter alia, the green bonds issuances. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can all hear me and see me well. I first of all apologize that I was able to join my fellow panelists in the session in person, but this is a great opportunity and honor to represent and discuss some of the more specific issues on how we mean financial markets and instruments. As the Islamic Development Bank has been to about 57 member countries, and we operate across different regions. We share 14 member countries in the Islamic Bank, and we've always had a great number of opportunities and funds to discuss some of these issues within not only our operational and financing instruments, but also specifically on innovations in climate financing areas specifically. I also wanted to mention that I completely agree with a lot of my preceding panelists that mentioned data and TATIANA and now in terms of the fact that let's get a few things out of the way. It's very simple. MDBs that provide and have a critical role to play in capacity development, technical assistance. We've watched the tremendous work that the Asian Development Bank has already done with the government of the Philippines on the Beam Broad frameworks and other instances. We've also seen IFC as a partner in India for the Beam for development projects and things like that. I've already gone through various different catalytic initiatives over there. But some of the areas that we really need to focus on, as in the risk mitigation and credit enhancement, that's where a lot of the innovation is required. And I think it was Diana or Diana before me was mentioning about how we need to have those supporting guarantees. The Islamic Development Bank has a guarantee issuing entity ICC, we call them Africa, and similar ones in Nigeria as well. Those are some specific examples that we can look into. The next item is to see how we develop these markets and have demonstrated effects. MDBs play that very essential role.
And the next point that I was coming to was on having a demonstration effect. The more the MDBs come in developing the local capital markets, by acting as anchor investors, it creates a demonstration effect. It brings others on board, and it really adds on to our convening ability as well on these items. And lastly, what I really want to touch upon is innovation in green finance. And that's where the MDBs need to keep on continuing to push on the envelope. I'll give you a specific example of the Islamic Development Bank. We adopted a sustainable finance framework where we basically try to come up with the right financing models to tailor social and green projects. Our Islamic bonds, we call them as sukuk, we've issued since 2019 nearly $5 billion worth of them. And they go through this virtuous cycle. The more projects we come up with, the more opportunities we have to issue those bonds, the more, the better funds you'll be able to raise, and the more you will be able to help the domestic financing systems as such. So those are some areas which have really had a great impact. And to be fair, a lot of our financial instruments have actually moved our climate ambition and targets. I'll give you an example. We, despite coming from half of our 57 member country membership are from the least developed country background. Despite that, we have a Paris alignment targets which we're hopefully going to be achieving by the end of the year. And we have climate financing targets of 35% by 2025. We are already at 33%. So it's a dual win. It not only supports our member countries and the regions in which we operate, but it will also actually improve the way we conduct our own businesses and make ourselves a workable region. With that, I'll pass it back to VP Roberta. Thank you.
Syed, thank you very much, because you raised a very important point, explaining very well, I think, the sustainable capital markets, not only when we issue our thematic sustainable bonds, but also when we help our DMC, so the development member countries, to issue and develop their own capital market. And again, a big role, a crucial role when we act as anchor investor for some corporate issuances of thematic bonds in our developing member countries. And thank you for giving, again, practical and concrete examples of this role that is relevant. Last, for this first round, JUNKYU can help in greening the financial system. For example, ADB strategic framework, supporting again our DMCs and supervisory toolkit. Please give us some example, concrete example of ADB work as well, and what would be the recommendation for ADB's actions and products on climate risk in supporting climate investments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, VP, and also I just want to thank all of our colleagues. And as you know, there is a benefit as in terms of the sequence in the last panelist, and I have a vantage point to compare every 7 operational priorities, and actually including when you look at it. Can you go to the next slide? And okay, go to the next slide. All right, so it already sees that when you look at the 7 operational priorities, and third operational priority is tackling climate change and the businesses, and also help ourselves, ADB self, and also working together with other MDBs and IFIs. And ADB in some way was well poised to work together. And then the next slide, and based on this, our framework, and we also have put in place very recently, the last year, and so-called the sector directional guide. So based on this vision, based on this operational priorities, and we look at this climate, this important, such an important, direction. We should work together. Very simply, we should work together between the sectors, and the theme, across ADB, knowledge, and the regional department, operation department, everybody. So we discussed about putting in place a sectoral directional guides. The sectoral directional guides, actually, we have 7 sector goals: education, energy, finance, health, transport, urban, and the water. All these 7 sectors have this sectoral directional guide, and looking at this climate component, the green component, and under this the strategy 2030 and the 7 operational priorities, and especially narrow down a little bit in the next one, and to financial sector directional guide. And this financial sector directional guide begins the understanding of what is the biggest challenges. The biggest challenge is definitely 7 challenges we put in place. One of them is climate change. And then we discuss a lot, and then how we want to be, where we want to be, how we can make it. So in terms of what we will do, how part, and we put in place the 6 guiding principles. The 6 guiding principles is innovative modalities in the products, and in private sector operations, and also tackling differentiated approaches and quality finance operations, and also effective collaboration, building skills and resources in emerging areas. So beginning from the journey of 2030 and framework and the 7 operational vision and the 7 operational priorities and all sectoral guides, especially financial sector, we put in place this financial sector directional guide. And it was approved the last year, I think it is October or November around. And then the ADB's toolbox, next slide. And it is pretty much similar, and together with other colleagues already mentioned about this toolbox. But one of the interesting toolbox I just want to mention is that ADB's support to implementation of the reforms and the standards, and of course international institutions and standard setting bodies. We think setting the standard setting, working together with the standard setting bodies is very important. For example, for the security side and IOSCO and also the ICMA, and for that, securities and also other institutions and IMF and other PIS definitely. And I think this is also the very important why we need a standard. And to assess and to monitor, we need a standard. And then another interesting point that I'd like to share, which is a strategic partnership. This strategic partnership we put in place, for example, the G-Fans APAC. It's, as you know, the Glasgow Financial Net Zero Alliance. This is one of the things we are currently putting a lot of effort in to spread the knowledge, and also looking at the specific projects. And also the loan condition and investment, it's pretty much similar to others. But in our roles, the next slide, and this in our roles, and I believe one of the most important thing is that not only assessing, we ADBs helping assessing and identifying climate risk, DMC policymakers for assessing and identifying climate risk, and also for developing and implementing climate risk management expectations. Very important thing is that we are working together with the government and the private sector both. This is one of the ABs, very strong, I believe it's a strength, working together with the government and private sector together so that ADB can help facilitate the market, transform the market, catalyze the market together. I think this is one of the things, and how we can work together with our two things that I'd like to say. We actually reorganize right now our whole ADB structure, working structure, so-called new operating model. So operation and the knowledge together to provide a very hands-on effective solutions to our clients, government and private sector both. And another one is that very important thing is that working together with these very knowledge excellence partners to provide a very innovative solutions, including innovative facilities, innovative modalities and the products. And one of the interesting things I'd like to mention is IFCAP. Very recently, 2 weeks ago, IFCAP was launched. The full name is Innovative Finance Facility for Climate and Asia and the Pacific. This is actually has a very innovative component to leverage ADB's capital. So this one is to building on the guarantees supported by donors' credit and to ADB's sovereign operations, so it will give more room to ADB's the capital to support additionally to the sovereign and the non-sovereign project. So we say $1 in up to $5 out. So these kind of innovative approach and closely working together with those knowledge partners and also the private sector, I think that is very, very important. And one very last thing, and before I close, is a very latest signing ceremony. The 2 weeks ago also, JPX MOU, and this is very interesting. Why? And JPX is basically a Japan exchange. Also the one of the good example how ADB is working together with our partners to provide innovative solutions to our DMC governments and to our DMC private sector partners. And I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, because again, we have just heard other concrete examples of work at ADB, but in general, that the work that MDBs can play. Be a solution bank, you said. Client centricity was very clear in the message, and some specific example, such as IFCAP, the facility that we have just launched, that the President has launched at our annual meeting 2 weeks ago. So thank you again. We have only 8 minutes.
As a risk management company is to transfer certain risks to an example, then ultimately the role is innate.
Alright, so napakadami nating natutunan na para sa mga dalubhasa ng pagbibigay ng pondo para sa mga proyektong green projects. So sana nga ay maisakatuparan ito. At isusunod naman natin itong how private sector can leverage multilateral development banks to support itong transition to net zero. So alamin natin at isusunod ang moderator pa rin ay si Miss Cathy Mars na Deputy Director General Private Sector Department ng Asian Development Bank. Hanggang sa muli, Miss Horizon Chaser, I love you all.